not on.
Okay?
No,
No,
you're not on.
closer.
How about now? All right, that sounds better. I got the thumbs up over there, so thank you. And I was able to waste like 15 seconds of the presentation. So thanks for being here. We're really excited to talk a little bit about our standards and the Blockchain Security Standards Council and the work we're doing. But first, let me introduce our panelists. So the first is Jota Carpanelli. He's the head of security services at OpenZeppelin. So
hi, everyone. Yeah, head of security services at OpenZeppelin. Joined the company around 7 years ago. Have been working at the beginning in OpenZeppelin contracts, so I kind of like understand why it's important to start discussing about standards and how important they are for our ecosystem. And yeah, I'm super happy to be here.
Awesome. And then next, and I always mess up Max's.
Max is okay.
We're just going to go with Max. Max is a security architect and red team lead at Figment.
Yeah, hey everyone. I've been at Figment for about 2 years now, largely in offensive security. I do security architecture, so that's like broad design, a lot of design review, system review, and I lead the red team. So in the red team, you know, we're trying to think like attackers, study attackers, understand how they break into systems, and get there before they do.
All right, and the last panelist we have is Joel Kerr. He's the head of DeFi Security at Coinbase. So, good, Joel.
Hey everyone, my name is Joel Kerr. I'm at Coinbase. I run the DeFi security team there. So we do everything related to the off-chain components with custodial, nodes, key management, to the on-chain pieces of what we list, from both the retail DEX side of it to the exchange side of it. So it's a whole gambit of technical security, security architecture for Coinbase.
Awesome, thank you. So let me start with the first question. It's kind of I guess a little bit of a basic question, but you know, you three are all members of the Blockchain Security Standards Council. You joined for a reason. So, and with that initial question, so why did you join? Why standards? What made you want to come and help develop standards around blockchain? What was the driving force around that? I'll start with Joel, and we'll work this way.
Excellent. All right, so I've been at Coinbase for 4 years. We've been building secure, technology and services that entire time. So I have two main things that I wanted to have with this Standards Council. One was, taking a lot of the learnings, best practices, everything we've been doing for the past, Coinbase has been around for a very long time. For all that time, putting them in a format that is, public, that both, developers, retail investors, institutional investors, they can all look at it and say, okay, these are the baselines that we want to agree upon. This is what a secure token looks like. This is what a secure system looks like for Web3. So make that public and make that so people can contribute. Second one is we have a lot of fantastic companies in the BSCC. I mean, Figment, OpenZeppelin, I love working with them. They are also top tier in their class, and so I'm, selfishly, I think we have a good program, but working with them, I get to see even more of what these other talents and other companies bring.
Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, so I think you kind of covered it. We got like a lot of different backgrounds. And because the industry is pretty complex, you need the various backgrounds. At Figment, we're a node operator. We operate validators. We operate a lot of nodes. We're a lot, we focus a lot on the off-chain security side. So integrating with you guys and talking about DeFi, talking about more on-chain security too, is a good thing, and it levels the playing field. And I think we bring a pretty unique angle to security as well, right?
In our case, OpenZeppelin, as you know, we have been building secure smart contracts for the last 8 years. We also perform audits. And we've seen so many times code that is not secure, and we're kind of like trying to find other ways of taking security to the next level. And just by seeing other industries that are not smart contracts, they all follow standards. And I think there's a reason for that. When you build smart contracts, you also follow some standards. ERC20 is a standard, ERC721 is a standard. And these standards kind of like define the way we interact with smart contracts and the way we operate with smart contracts, but also how we build smart contracts. So bringing standards throughout the development life cycle, but not only while you build smart contracts, when you do operational security, just when you work with nodes, you need standards to make sure that at least there's like a baseline of things that you're doing right and you comply with that.
Great, thank you. So when, if you look at standards, I think sometimes people see, especially if they're maybe not industry standards, but the more government standards and regulations, you hear a lot of times this is going to limit innovation. This is going to cause challenges to innovation. Do you think that's true? Do you think or do you think it helps to promote more innovation around those standards? If someone were to ask you that question and say, hey, Max, you want me to do these standards, but it's going to really impact what I can do and innovate in my space?
I think that's a problem of the standard, and not standards in general. So you can design a standard to be flexible, to be approachable, to be agile, to use the term, right? I don't think we should have 100-page standards and complex standards. I think we need to really, as an industry, make them adoptable, approachable, and maybe even more piecemeal, right? So let's not try to secure absolutely everything all at once. Let's break it down into something manageable. Let's let companies and projects choose to adopt a specific standard that is, that works in their niche, and to do it well.
Yeah, and also standards can evolve. It happens, for example, with the ERC20 standard that people use it, everyone uses it, and then if you want to add a feature on top, you can, for example, you want to use a vault, you also have a standard for that, the 4626. So as long as you understand that for adoption of standards, it's important to make them so that people are happy using them and you're flexible enough while keeping security that people are going to use them. I think is the way to go.
Awesome. Joel, do you want to add anything? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think they touched on it very well with what we look to do with the BSCC. The only thing I would add to that too is I think the goal of what we've been doing and how we've been doing it is really to have a baseline approach. We have a very approachable, you look at the standards, they're not 100 pages, they're not very discrete controls. It's more of general guidance around security of, major domains in Web3, but you can go through and read it in, minutes, not hours. You don't need an LLM to read through it. You can actually go through and understand it yourself and be am I doing these things in my program today?
Great, thanks. And so, we started with we released the first set of standards in May of this year. So they were covering sort of token integration, key management, node operation, and some baseline security standards as well. I would note that I had a conversation today with somebody who's already looking at the token integration standard, already starting to use that in some of their solutions. So it's great that adoption is starting to happen and people are starting to use it. But why those four? Why was that sort of where we started? I know both, Joel and Max, you were helping to draft and editors for some of those standards. What was the driving force to start there?
You want me to go first or you, Max? All right. So I mentioned it earlier around the reason that I want to get involved and the reason that Coinbase wanted to get involved. And the first reason was we have had this program for many, many years. We've built it out. And so I think with these four, the goal, and at least for the token integration standard, the one that my team has really written and we've put out, is to take a lot of what we've seen on the secure asset side, what Coinbase will look for when we look to add assets to the exchange, and put that in a point where people can then go and say what is our baseline there. So I think from the four side of it, at least on the token integration side of it, it's one that we know very well. It's a structure that we use every day. Is something that I would love to also take to tokens and say hey, here's your starting point. It's not the entire program what we do, but it's a starting point of security. And I think that's why when it comes to, I'm not going to speak to the node operator as much, but I think Max might have a similar answer, but it's it's part of our bread and butter. It's part of what we do every day. It's our strongest kind of here's our first step in it. We're going to take that approach. But even with the key management and general security and privacy one, that's kind of the same idea around we know these areas very well. It's a discipline that we want to start with, and that will give us a foundation to build on from there.
Yeah, I think we picked bedrock standards, right? So yes. We picked, every chain protocol, whatever it needs to operate nodes. You need to think about how you're storing your keys. You need generic kind of like security guidance. So we kind of picked those also just based on what our company's backgrounds were, I think, what we knew best, what we curated over years and understood very well. And now we're seeing sort of like the next wave of standards that we're working on is kind of broader. And because we've been having these discussions for a year now, we're starting to talk to each other. We're kind of understanding a bit more about like where those blind spots are in the industry.
Awesome. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to add on that too.
Go for it.
You know, so I think Max said it exactly right. Like, these are baseline bedrock standards, and not only are they meant to be like, here's your starting point, but for you individuals, but also for us. We can say like, well, now that we know what like secure key management looks like, we can now say, and nodes, we can now start saying like, well, what is the relationship between these two? Like, what does a transaction security look like? And we can reference these standards and say like, you know, when you're looking to sign, use this. When you're looking to broadcast, use this. And so like, it's also foundational for us just as a organization of like, now we can build on top of this and get into the more complex stuff or the more niche.
And I think that the easiest answer to your question is basically to avoid hacks, to stop seeing protocols losing money, to stop seeing companies losing money. And if we want to see this new next wave of liquidity coming to crypto, coming to blockchain, they're also going to feel comfortable having those standards and seeing that there's a framework that they can follow to mitigate as much as they can these losses.
No, I think that makes sense, and especially with sort of the baseline security standard, it's not complex. It's pegged a lot to the NIST cybersecurity framework, something that works, and so that a company that's two people in a garage can hopefully follow that standard, get that baseline, put more trust in the space, and then build out with the other 4 standards and kind of grow on top of that. So a good baseline for us and a good sort of initial step. So we've sort of got those 4 out. We're working on adoption, but that's not kind of all. There's a couple more in process right now that aren't quite public. They're getting there. One is smart contract, which is one that we've been working on and think, you know, really important next step. And I know, Jota, you've got some thoughts around kind of the importance of the smart contract standard and where that's going and how that may play a role within, you know, some of the additional work, some of the work we're doing already.
So yes, of course, after auditing so many projects throughout the years, you can see that developers follow different rules. They have different ways of doing things. Some of them adopt audits as a way of securing their smart contracts. Some of them just do testing to do that. Some of them are doing fuzzing. Some of them are just vibe coding. So it's tough. And having a baseline in smart contracts, I not only think it's necessary, it's a must, but also I don't think it's that difficult to adopt. If you think more of like the shift left mentality of not only thinking of an audit to be something that has to be a standard, which I believe it should be, at least for now, just thinking about going to the very beginning of a team of 2 people in their garage developing smart contracts, thinking of like, okay, what are the best practices that I can follow for this? Well, I might just go out there and see if there's open source secure contracts that I can build on top and use those ones, see that they're battle tested. That gives you some peace of mind and also kind of like a baseline to start working and building from there. Following that, when you enter to the development life cycle, also understand that there's certain rules that you should, or at least it would be nice for you to follow in terms of how you test your code base. It's not the same having 50% than 80%, than 90%, than 100% of test coverage. It's not the same just testing business logic when you write a unit test than trying to actually break your code while you write a unit test. And that also brings to fuzzing. Fuzzing should be part of a standard that says that every single smart contract, in unit tests you can't actually check everything you want. Well, fuzzing really helps on that. And while you're developing, also follow best practices. Know that you have to document your code so that your other developers on your team understand what you're doing, and also auditors understand what you're doing, and also the community, because we know that this is an ecosystem where we like open source coding, can understand what you try to do, So I feel that it's something that has to be from the beginning of the development lifecycle. And then, of course, the obvious ones. The one that I already mentioned, auditing is super important, and having a standard of the things that you would like to see in an audit is also something that should be standardized. And beyond audits, after someone reviews the code, is if you're going to continue iterating your code, is how do you evolve internally and what baseline rules you follow to make sure that when you introduce a new PR with new code, you are secure. Beyond that, it can happen that after 3 years, you want to add a new feature to your code, or you want to go to a new version of your code, and knowing that all this is still public, your old smart contracts might still hold money. We've seen a pretty bad hack in an old version of Balancer happening a few weeks ago. Defining standards on how to move liquidity from one version to the other also could be something very, very useful. And from there onwards, when it's not related to only like coding smart contracts, is how you interact with smart contracts. Knowing that interop is a thing. You're gonna, like, smart contracts don't work by themselves. They talk to other smart contracts. If you have an AMM or you have a lending borrowing protocol, you will likely work with other smart contracts to check Oracle prices, to deposit your liquidity to other pools, and having standards where you have clearly defined how those communications happen. It's also easier for developers to interact with your system and for you to interact with those other systems too.
So it's a lot to take in. So I would say, I mean, one of the things I want to touch on is sort of the auditing piece that you talked about, because that's sort of a next step for us. Like, otherwise, you sort of put these standards out, and if they just sit there, nobody adopts them. We're not auditing against them to get them in and to sort of build that trust and build that, hey, you know, you're certified as BSSE. You've got a, you know, let's just say OpenZeppelin's a BSSE certified, playing it forward standards company. You're certifying your clients. I mean, that audit is the next step, and something that needs to do. Sort of, you know, is that the right next step for us to be doing? We've got some standards out. We've got a couple more. What should be next after those are in place?
We got this question pretty often lately of what's our methodology when we audit. Most people usually think of smart contract audit firms as maybe 1, 2, 3 security researchers reviewing code, doing this like line-by-line process to make the code bulletproof. But sometimes they don't know the things that we check on the code. So a good starting point would be to have a list of everything that a smart contract auditor should be checking in a smart contract. Of course, again, it's a baseline because novel issues are the ones that in the end make protocols lose money. And the important thing also related to that is that you can evolve the standard and add all these ones when something happens. Hopefully nothing happens, but if there's a bug bounty and in that bug bounty you see that there was a novel issue, well, try to adopt that in the standards as soon as possible and put that during your offering your smart contract audit process.
Perfect. Joel, go ahead.
Yeah, adding on to a lot of what's been said here on the audit side of it, smart contract security side of it, a couple of thoughts. The first one is, you know, the first 4 standards we put out, we had the token integration standard. And that was you know, mainly looking at what can you as a third party verify about a token. And like Jota said earlier, the new smart contract standard kind of eclipses that in a way of it's not just what you can see on chain, it's also like what does the company do, you know, how do we audit against it and everything like that. And I think we covered that really well, but that's a good example of an evolution of a standard of token integration. We looked at it and we said, well, really this is a lot similar to the smart contract standard. And so we're looking at like what elements are we keeping, what elements are we merging. So there's that piece of it. On the compliance and, you know, business certification side of it, this is something we really want to start standing up. We mentioned it earlier, but we have the 4 standards, and we're putting out 2 more. But those are not really effective unless you have a way to say, like, how do you go to a digital asset or a, you know, custodial company or a node provider and actually hold them to the standard that we're writing. And so that's a lot of what we're doing now on that side of it, of like figuring out what that audit track looks like, the business compliance track, working with other people in this industry, on doing that. Certainly for Coinbase, we want to take the standards we've written and apply it to ourselves. So we actually, so Figment was one of the primaries on the node operator standard. We've taken that, we've self-certified. We've gone through and see how it applies to us. And so now we would love to have that where it's like companies can come and actually hold us accountable for what we've done.
Yeah, I think it's about creating trust too, right? We can write standards all day. There's a whole bunch of stuff to write standards about. We can go on and on. But if there's no pull-through, then you're not really creating an environment for end users or end companies to trust the other companies, right? So that's why you need this auditing kind of, the whole other side of the BSSC, which is really what we're working on now, is okay. How can you prove that I'm holding my company up to the standard? How can I prove to my end users and my customers that I really care about my smart contract security or my node operation or whatever, right? It's about expressing that you're like a mature agent within the space and that you understand the material well enough that you've chosen a standard to adhere to.
So we touched a little bit on so we've got one other standard that we're working on right now, which is really looking at the life cycle of a transaction. So really, and security around it. So it's transactions, security is kind of what its sort of working title is at this point. With that standard or that draft standard, what kind of attacks are you hoping to help defend against in developing that standard?
Yeah, so I kind of see transactions as the buffer zone between off-chain and on-chain, right? So you're creating a transaction, a string of bytes that can be super simple or complex, and you're giving it to a user or a system or something to sign, and then that gets immortalized on-chain. So we really need to get that sort of buffer correct, and we have to make sure that we're doing as much as we can as an industry to both empower users and systems to not blind sign stuff or whatever. We also need to make sure that our security teams, both internal, external, can have kind of understand what the chain of custody of a transaction is as it goes from the system that produced that transaction. Maybe it transited a whole bunch of other systems. Did it get modified? How was it modified? What triggers do you have to know if it was modified? And then what actions can you take to make sure that this modified transaction doesn't keep getting propagated through the network and given to a user? So yeah, we're working on this transaction lifecycle safety security standard now. I think we're zeroing in on really the structure right now. We all understand that it's important internally. We all understand the bits and pieces of how we want to express what someone should be thinking about when they're looking to sort of secure their transaction supply chain. And really that comes down to producers of transactions, relays, systems that move a transaction, a string of bytes from one system to another, signers, obviously, and then the whole process of broadcasting, right? You put it on chain. Did it get accepted on chain correctly? Was there an error? Do you have to retry? How do you retry? How do you, right? All these kind of meta things that we kind of take for granted that if you don't do correctly could have some pretty bad outcomes.
Yeah, adding on to that, Max covered it great of what we're looking to do and how we're looking to build this and everything. Just a little bit more about why this is so important is at least within Coinbase, this is very near and dear to our heart and our mission of if a user is sending funds, we want to make sure that request goes through untampered, it's fully verified and validated, multiple steps. And so that's something that we've been working on a lot, and other companies as well. And so getting that where that's a very mature side of it, not just how do you generate these, but how do you actually shepherd them along the entire process and verify them along the entire process so the end user is secure and they feel confident on that transaction. And even though I know we're looking at it Coinbase, we're looking at mainly the custodial side, this is also something that applies even in the self-custody world. You're still generating a transaction, you're still signing it, you're still broadcasting it. So that's something that I would love to even have for end users to say, is this protocol, is it handling my transaction safely, and bring it in here on that side of it.
To add to that is that I actually think that transactions and signing transactions is one of the worst user experiences anyone can go through these days. Even for security people like me, it sometimes is like, how do I validate this transaction? What's the best way of doing it? Have my ledger, I see all these like characters. I'm gonna have to like scroll it and write it down and actually check what's doing. So it's clearly a problem for technical people. Imagine for someone that has their ledger and they just want to move funds from one account to the other or put their money in a protocol, making sure that their computer is not compromised and has changed the transaction itself to move the funds from one place to the other, just like changing the address, for example, or changing the amounts or whatever. So having a standard around how you generate transactions and how you propagate transactions is super important.
So I want to stick on sort of the overall security side of things. So I've heard people say kind of Web 2 is a backdoor to Web 3. Is there truth to that? And if I'm a Web 3 company, what should I be concerned about? What should I be thinking about?
Well, there's a fact, and the fact is that in the last few years, the most amount of money lost hasn't come from smart contract hacks, has come from maybe what you say Web 2 related stuff, keys getting compromised, transactions being modified, NPM packages with some sort of like malicious code injected. So I wouldn't say that Web 2 is backdoor to Web 3, but clearly smart contracts and auditing has gotten to a place, in my opinion, where the security is relatively good, and then hackers are looking for other things. What are the weak links these days that go beyond smart contracts? Because if I sit down and I start reading a smart contract and I can't actually break it, it's like, okay, but I want to steal this money. What's the other ways I can do it? I just have to go back to Web 2 and see what were the ways back in the day, not in Web 3, where you could steal money. And things like phishing are already happening, and again, losing a lot of money from things that we shouldn't be focusing on, but actually, yes, we must focus on this because it's happening. It's just like a new, not that new because it's been happening for a few years, but a new-ish attack vector that we weren't considering several years ago because everyone was so focused on smart contract security. Now it's super important.
Yeah, so like threat actors are always going to take the path of least resistance, right? Like they're also an economic agent. They are doing cost-benefit analysis. They can spend years trying to break your smart contract system, or they can pay someone a few $1,000s to send you like a fake resume that you're going to open, right? So they're always going to take that path. So really, it's less that like Web 2 is a backdoor to Web 3, is that it's a whole system, right? Web 3 doesn't exist on its own. It's sort of underpinned by real compute and real data centers and real people behind it. Real systems hold keys and humans hold keys. So everything that like the last 40 years of like cybersecurity has learned still has to apply to Web 3 companies, and that can be a pretty big burden. So that's, through our standards, we try to think about that angle too and not bucket ourselves too much on the Web 3 side.
Yeah, I mean, on that side of it, you can look at it Web 2, Web 3. I think that's like traditionally how we always think of it. You could also think of like local actions and on-chain actions, right? And I think a lot more of, back in the day when blockchains and DeFi was a little bit more mature, our on-chain services were, growing. They were like kind of dynamic and like, it was easier to say like the smart contract's insecure, this protocol's insecure, let's attack it. And like over the past years, we've really been maturing more with our on-chain services and our on-chain, like just the whole, ecosystem has. So that's why, like Max said, attackers are economically motivated. It's, easier or, a null attack path to look for those local actions, those Web 2 actions. So I think that's for us, like just in this space, we have to think holistically. It's not just, what is the on-chain piece of it? We have to think about like, how do our users interact with it? How do we interact with it as companies? And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of this as we go and become even more and more, larger, the whole DeFi space.
So, and I want to jump back a little bit, and Jota talked about sort of smart contract side, and that's generally pretty secure, and there's other gaps, and we're looking at weaknesses. So if you're a DeFi team and you're about to deploy a smart contract, and you can kind of take our standard in mind, what are people normally, what are they missing? What are they forgetting to do?
Okay, I can kind of, so I'm somewhat biased. I spent a lot of time looking at CI/CD pipelines and understanding those and attacking them. So like at the end of the day, smart contract is code, and you have to manage code, and you're managing, you have a software development lifecycle, and that code has to end up on chain somehow. So my advice would be take a look at your pipelines, understand what kind of third-party code that you might be depending on in your pipeline. We're talking even GitHub Actions, right? We saw TJ Actions was a massive compromise, which thankfully didn't work, but was definitely targeted at our industry. So yeah, if you had to look at one thing, I would say go take a look at your pipelines, understand them very well.
To add to that, in the smart contract side, have a security mindset when you code. Business logic, of course, is super important because the code has to do actually what you think should do. But the mindset should be, the two questions that people should be asking themselves is, the first one, is this secure? And the second one to be, is this following the business logic? Instead of, this is following the business logic, and then if it's secure or not.
Okay. You want to add one more, or are you good?
I think I'm done yapping. Okay. I want to hear, questions.
All right. So we've got a few minutes left. We saved some time for any questions from the audience. Does anyone have any questions for the panelists?
Wow. I guess I'm not done yapping.
We answered all the questions ahead of time, apparently.
We're just that good about standards, or maybe standards aren't as motivating as we think.
Maybe not.
We're going to be out there, so anyways, if you...
there's someone over here. There. Go ahead. I think the question was, are you... we're going to get a microphone to repeat it.
Are you considering for the future work of standards also standards in zero-knowledge proofs and other fancy cryptographic protocols?
All right.
So I will say absolutely. We would love to consider those. We would love to have standards on those. And I think one of the constraints that we've had as a group is the knowledge and ability to accurately represent that in a standard that's usable, right? The two standards that we're doing now, smart contract security and transaction security, these are things that we know very well. And there are more people to BSCC than just this, but that's our bread and butter. That's what we would know a lot more in. So on that, yes, we would consider it. We would love to build it. I think that's something that we would want to invite others to come to us and help do that, particularly if you're in that ZK space, if you're in that cryptography space, and say hey, here are some things that we need to consider as we start looking at things like quantum computing, or you start looking at things like more ZK built into chains. And so I would invite feedback for that. I invite us approaching us. Something I didn't think we really touched on is even though we're up here and we're big companies, we really want to invite a lot of commentary and a lot of engagement from everyone on what we've put out there. This group, we meet weekly and discuss the standards. We discuss what we're doing. It is not like a room with a bunch of suits creating these. It is, the technical leaders in this space, coming together and saying, this is what we're really doing. And so if you're a technical leader that's very knowledgeable in a space, we would love to get your engagement, your involvement, teach us, and then we'll also teach you. So I would say that's a very long-winded answer, saying yes, we would love to consider it, but I don't think it's something that is our primary objective right now, and it's something that if we had people that are more knowledge and learned in that, then certainly we would love to consider it.
Thanks.
I think that's a good point, Joel, because we have about 11 companies that are members now, and there's more room at the table, and there's places where there's gaps for us as well. So for just to follow up, we've talked back and forth about, do we need to do a stablecoin standard? And I think we've sort of come to the conclusion we need a couple more players around the table to help really develop it the right way, and making sure that it is a good standard that holds up to the other work that we've done. And again, like to Joel's point, we're working to be as transparent as we can. Once we have our drafts out, we put them out for public comment so that we can get that extra feedback, because we don't have all the answers, and so we want to be able to get that feedback and understand where we may have missed. But the more people we can get around the table helping to develop this, the better off we all are. Any other? Oh, I have another question here. Oh, here we come.
When I think about standards in the normal Web 2 world, I think about processes that takes years to build and that are meant to stick for years too. How do you see this coupling with an ecosystem that is continuously changing? And how do you see standards that evolve to be adopted if they change quickly?
Probably moving fast, being community driven, so the people that are innovating, are adding all these changes, should also think of which standards should be built so that the things that they're building come already with this baseline that we're talking about. I think that's super important, because otherwise there's only so much an entity, I think, can do. It's what he was saying just now, bring to the table all these innovators, all these people working in different fields, and work together on, okay, this is gonna go live. What are the things that we have to follow? What are the standards, the minimum baseline, and then build on there, from there, because you can define a standard and you can define something very simple, but then again, it will keep evolving and you have to add things on top. But at the same time, keeping it flexible enough so that others can also implement that standard.
And I think we mentioned earlier, like we're not trying to develop 100-page standards that are really complex, and that we want to get that baseline going. And I think we're constantly looking and evaluating the ones we have published to say, hey, are there small changes? Are there things that we should look at to update those standards over time as the industry evolves and things evolve as well? All right. Any other questions? All right, so I'll give you guys all like a quick closing remark on any like last remarks, and then also favorite thing you've done here this week.
Wow. Okay, closing remark, I guess. Don't forget about off-chain security. It's the world that I live in, so I care about it deeply. A cool thing I've done this week. I don't know this. I don't know. I wasn't ready for the question.
You must have gone and seen something, had a good dinner or did something.
Oh yeah, we went to Fogón Asado. It's a really, really nice restaurant, like amazing barbecue. We loved it.
In my case, my take is the contrary of what you said. It's like, don't focus too much on off-chain stuff, and also remember that you have to take care of the on-chain stuff. And fun stuff, I don't know, I love the city, so everything has been fun.
All right, Joel, closing, you get to close it, make it a good one.
I mean, of course, I have to say, you have to balance your on-chain and off-chain security program, right? So have to say it. What I would say is, like, I've really enjoyed being part of Blockchain Security Standards Council. I've said at the beginning, but like these are a really great group of people, really great group of companies, and like I'm really excited for this going forward. And so I invite anyone to help reach out, or to me or Adam or any of us. Like, it'd be amazing to work with more people. And so I just invite you to do so. As far as fun thing I've done, did you know they have really good steak here? And like, so I've been eating a pretty good amount of that. Yeah, it's kind of good. So.
All right.
I agree.
4 votes for steak. All right, well, I just want to thank all our panelists for being here today, and thank you for being here. We'll be around and look forward to chatting with you more about the work we're doing, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.